start with the simplest practices of document your build procedures. Right? So have the build procedure documented, go over it, review it, see if there are any places where you are not sure about what you're bringing into your build.
Welcome to the DevSec for Scale podcast, the show that makes security a first-class citizen for growing companies. My name is Jeremy Hest, Head of Developer Relations at Achilles, the secrets management SaaS platform. This interview podcast brings security experts and practitioners together to offer practical and actionable ways for small and growing companies to implement security best practices using shift-left principles without interrupting developer life cycles. Welcome back, everybody, to the DevSec for Scale podcast. With me today is a fantastic guest and a friend of mine. His name is Anton Weiss. He is a software delivery futurist. I think that name was self-given, right? And he's the founder of a DevOps consulting company called Otomato Software. And so before, Ant, we get into a little bit more about you and what it means to be a futurist, let's get right into it. As a DevOps consultant for many years, as we know you are, what do you see as the biggest supply chain threat when it comes to shipping code?
Well, first of all, hello. Thanks, Jeremy, for hosting me. It's been a while, actually, since I've been a guest on a podcast. Usually I host folks. I'm also a podcast host. So my podcast is called DevOps Shorts, and it's all about DevOps, devs, ops, other mythical creatures. So check that out. But anyway, it's fun. Thanks for inviting me, and hello to everyone. So the most significant threat security-wise is always people. That's like when we talk about DevOps, you said I'm a DevOps consultant, whatever that means. DevOps is a people problem. DevOps is solving a people problem, right? So DevOps is there. DevOps is not about, automating stuff. It is about automating stuff, but first and foremost, it's about collaboration. It's about how folks from different parts of the company, from different functions in the company, how they work together, how to help them us work together in a better, more harmonic, more pleasant way. So back to security. What's the biggest threat? Well, the biggest threat for security is always people. So first of all, of course, those people who want to break in, and then those people who are supposed to keep those bad actors from breaking in. Okay, and trouble is, okay, we probably still don't have the correct security infrastructure for the ever-changing technologies that we have to work with today, right? The technologies are changing fast, blazingly fast, and it's very hard for the security tools, for the security techniques, practices to catch on. A couple of years ago, I'm not a security professional, but a couple of years ago, when the cloud native technology, specifically containers, started to be used all around, I found myself teaching security professionals about containers because they were realizing that here's a totally new model of software delivery, and the security practices that they used to work with up until now changed, and they can't use the same stuff that they were using up until then for the containers because they don't understand this new tech. Okay, so back to where I started. The tooling is slowly catching up. It's always in that catch-up game. But even when the tooling is there, so for now there's this great initiative of SigStore and all of the tools they're developing, and there are other initiatives, but the tooling is still not mature enough. It's still very hard to integrate. You still need folks in the know, folks who understand not only the tooling and not only the tooling that it was made for, but also the security practices and the security concepts that this new tooling is based upon in order to integrate this correctly, in order to just have it in place, you know. And it's, let's be sincere and frank here, it's not the first concern that comes to mind when you start building out your software delivery pipeline.
Absolutely, for sure. We could talk a little bit more about that. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about you. Why don't you give us, a quick introduction, who you are, what it means, to be a futurist, and a little bit about your company.
Yes, so I started Otomato about 8 years ago. So actually, I started by moonshining. I was still working as a head of DevOps at a startup.
Moonlighting.
Sorry, moonlighting again.
Moonshine is alcohol.
Well, it's also fun, but
it's also fun.
So right, yeah, that's what I meant. So I started by moonlighting. Basically, I was still working as a head of DevOps at a startup, but I always had this dream of taking the leap and going out on my own and starting something, a company, a business, building a product, which I still have to do, right? And I started by consulting on the side a little bit here and there. This was 8 years ago, so I already had about 12, 13 years of industry practice. That's how it started. But then I realized that the demand for DevOps is growing all the time. And things that I know can help lots of companies out there, and not only the company that I was working at the time. And I started building this out. First as a solopreneur, then folks started joining me. There's Alex Chappelle, who's been my partner for the last couple of years. And then we started bringing junior engineers on board and teaching. So we do consulting, and we also do technical training. It's a big part of what we do, because we deeply believe in knowledge sharing. We think that knowledge isn't really worth anything unless you share it with the community. So
the very DevOps type of culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
DevOps, open source, it's all intermixed. So we use open source technologies, we learn open source technology, and then we teach open source technologies. We've been teaching things starting from Linux and basics like Git and Bash scripting, and up to cloud native technologies that we've been implementing for our customers and teaching. And security for cloud native technologies is also becoming part of that landscape. Okay, we're not, again, I think it's very important to make this separation. We're not security professionals. Security is starting to play the ever bigger role in what we do, because the awareness has greatly improved, and because the tooling has improved, and it's becoming actually easier to do this shift left that we're always talking about, to integrate that in your supply chain. But still, it's I see
and the hacks are becoming bigger.
Exactly. So it's always that catch-up game with the bad actors, and there is no code that can be broken. By the way, taking us back to what was the biggest threat of any for any supply chain. I was talking about people. It always brings to mind the whole story with the cracking of Enigma. The Turing's machine that was meant for that, and that is considered one of the earliest uses of computer technology. Basically, the the foundation of what we do with computers today. And it was meant to break the German security in World War II. And the backdoor into breaking that technology, into breaking that encryption, of course, was humans not following the operation procedures that they were supposed to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. So great. Now let's get back into some more questions. So let's start off with a personal question. Do you think, is there a story or anything that you can share with us about an experience that you had dealing with some sort of supply chain attack?
Yeah, actually, we've had a number of stories, from the simplest and most stupidest one. So a junior engineer was performing a task. It wasn't even a production task. It was something like a test we've given them. So an assignment, a home assignment, and they inadvertently pushed the AWS access keys to a public Git repo, realized that that's what happened 5 minutes after that, and tried to erase that, but it was too late. Oh, maybe they made the repository private, but it was too late, because that, even less than 5 minutes, that was enough for somebody to discover those keys. But the engineer, it was late at night, so the engineer thought that it was okay because they turned it to a private repository very, very quickly. But the next morning, I woke up to a $15,000 AWS bill.
Yeah, apparently there are
crypto miners were running
tons of miners. Yeah, tons of those automated programs running, always searching for some sort of password, some sort of credential to leak. Wow. Well, you said you had multiple stories. What else?
Yeah, but so that was like, a very simple but a very traumatic experience with one of our bigger customers. We had a much more interesting story with one of the open source packages that they were using being replaced by a totally similar package that had one of its dependencies tampered with. And so when it was getting installed, it brought with it an unwelcome guest.
Some malicious software, yeah.
Yeah, we did discover that, actually. So we found that the package that was resulting from that was suddenly significantly larger than we expected it to be, and there were no code changes that were supposed to lead to that. So we did discover that pretty early, mostly by luck. So we didn't have any automated procedure comparing the sizes of the packages, but we were just browsing for packages and suddenly noticed that I think it was a Docker image, that the newer Docker image was significantly larger than the previous ones. And okay, that was the happy ending there.
that I guess that's a happy ending if you found it before it went into production.
Exactly.
So how do you think devs at smaller companies, especially talking about open source software, how can they keep their systems, secure from supply chain attacks? I know it's never going to be perfect, but what are some ways that at least smaller companies, growing companies can already start now? Welcome my other guest.
Oh, it's him or her?
It's a her.
Okay, hello there. I have two of those back at home, but I locked the door so they cannot come in.
What's supposed to happen, but my security is apparently penetrable also. So what? How do you think devs, like I said, devs at smaller companies, how do you think they, using specifically in regards to open source software? Of course, we've been hearing a lot about NPM packages, with malicious code lately and all that. So how do you think they can, what can they implement now to already secure their supply chains?
Well, first of all, there is the SLSA, the newly published concepts, or what do they call it, the security levels for software architects. So that's just worth looking at. It starts with the simplest practices of document your build procedures. Right? So have the build procedure documented, go over it, review it, see if there are any places where you are not sure about what you're bringing into your build. Okay, make sure your pipeline is hermetic. So don't pull packages directly from the internet. Have a proxy repository that you go through. That's also not too hard. There are open source tech for that, so you don't have to buy JFrog. You can use self-hosted Nexus for that, and that also allows you to have proxies. Of course, as a next step, and that becomes harder, have some scanning for that proxy repository that scans all of the packages that get there whenever they're updated. But for that, you'll probably need somebody who would take care of that, and we just support these procedures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, code scanners. So code scanners, we have free open source code scanners, Docker image scanners, and I'm not taking it further. I'm not saying sign your software artifacts. I realize that is, even though, the practices are there. So I haven't seen it used almost anywhere, but, the Docker image signing has been out there for ages. And all you need to do in order to enable Docker image signing is just, set an environment variable. But how many organizations out there do that?
Right. And going into following that up, this is a question that I've had is because we're dealing with all these packages that are open source and we don't necessarily know what's going on. Should we generally trust suppliers, of these types of packages, and how should we deal with using their software if this is, if there are just consequences like this? Or is it a zero trust type of thing? I know zero trust is an overused term sometimes. Yeah. But
the thing is this: trust is very personal. So I would say, yeah, sure, trust people. Somebody else would say, no, don't trust anyone. Somebody else will say, trust those folks who have proven that they can be trusted, and that's okay. I actually there's no one answer. What I would say, no, I suppose, don't trust because you don't know who suppliers are, because what are the chances that you can know each and every supplier and what is happening in their lives, and if they're hostages to a terrorist organization today? We have no idea, right? So we can trust people, but we don't know what's happening with them. And even the most trustable person can become a total freak because they're scared, because they're angry, because, I don't know, their cat just scratched them. Okay.
A lot of different reasons. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we all get crazy sometimes, and that's something to take into account. So it's good to have automated procedures in place that would make sure that
that you don't have to trust, that you can verify.
Exactly. Have robots to verify whatever you do, because we humans are unreliable, and that's the beauty of us being human.
Absolutely. So one of the questions, Anton, that I like to ask all my guests to wrap up our podcast is, can you give us one or two tips for some simple steps that developers can take today to generally secure their code and their work without taking too much time away from their daily cycles?
Well, use free open source code scanners. And make these security practices, you're saying not taking too much time. It's like, the thing is, when we're only focused on building and making, and that's actually the fun in what we do, right? We always acquire technical debt. And we need that technical debt to go further, to get to that future that I love so much, right? But the debt keeps accumulating, and then at a certain point, it becomes too heavy a burden, and that becomes the roadblock on the way to future. So in the same way that we tell folks to leave some time to pay off the technical debt, in the same way we need to leave some time to pay off security debt. Okay, so have code scanners in place. That's easy. They're free, they're open source. You know, it just takes about 15 minutes to add them into your software delivery pipeline. You don't necessarily need to look at their results each and every build, but if once a week you go and look at that report and you just give yourself some time to look at what it says and maybe decide to take care of some of the severest vulnerabilities found, then you're already in a better place.
Absolutely. Great. All right. Some fantastic tips and a great episode. Learned a lot, really interesting stuff. So, Ant, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure that we will hear back from you again in the future, and we might have to have you on for a future meetup as well at some point. We'll see how that goes. So thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it, and have a really good one.
Thanks, Jeremy. It was fun. And yeah, hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good.